Borthakur IAS Academy. Prostuti aru adhyayoner nirbhorjogyo thikona. Borthakur IAS Academy.
Welcome to the Hindu analysis for 6th July 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. SC aghast that Section 66A of IT Act is still being used. So what is Section 66A of IT Act? Section 66A of IT Act says that any person who posted a social media message that may cause annoyance or found to be grossly offensive by the recipient can complain against the person for the same, and the police can initiate proceedings against him under Section 66A of IT Act. Now, if the investigation officer found it to be true under the Section 66A of IT Act, they can be imprisoned, or they can be imprisoned to a maximum period of 3 years. So it's a section in the IT Act that attracts imprisonment as a causality. Now in 2015, Justice Rohinton Nariman struck down that Section 60A from the IT Act. He authored a judgment where they said that it was vaguely worded and it is entirely arbitrary, meaning the provision itself was vaguely worded and it can be interpreted any way and in any form and might be used against certain people to take coercive action or something like that, and they said that we are not going to allow this to happen, so we are going to struck it down. Now recently, during a hearing in a case, the justice found that the justices found that the Section 66A, which was struck down in 2015, was being used in full force, meaning they found multiple cases where cases were being registered against people under Section 66A of IT Act. Now, as far as why they are doing it, according to our Attorney General 𝐂𝐸 he pointed out that the law books that are published post-verdict of 2015 featured the non-existent 66A in full, and the police officer who registers a case while looking at only sections in the main text, and the fact that the section has been struck down is given only as a footnote. That is what is his reply. So meaning what? When a police is registering a case, they tend to open up the law books under the section books, and they look at what would be the relevant section that a person can be booked under. And his point is that, or the Attorney General's point is that, whatever the books that came post this judgment, they to this day display the entire section, which though should be non-existent but is still printed in the book in full. And the fact that it has been struck down is only given as a footnote at the bottom of the page. So the police do not read the footnotes but generally look at the section and they simply invoke it against a person for their actions. So I found it very interesting that we are still going back and forth as to whether the book has it or the book doesn't it, but I found it very interesting nonetheless. So that is Section 68A for you. It is struck down in 2015 but still being used. So nothing but a surprise for Supreme Court of India. Moving on to the next article, Twitter failed to comply with IT rules, says Centre. Now the central government on Monday informed the Delhi High Court stating that Twitter, the microblogging platform, has failed to comply with Indian laws, particularly the new IT rules of 2021, and hence it lost its immunity as an intermediary, because they say that when Twitter was asked to appoint a compliance officer, instead of appointing a compliance officer, they gave it to a person who is situated in United States. The IT rules clearly states that the compliance officer should be in India and should be an Indian. Now this is in violation of the rules. Hence, the central government said we took away the intermediary status, and unless Twitter complies with it, we are not going to relook at this position. Because Twitter last week had informed the High Court that they have an interim resident grievance officer and an interim nodal contact person in India, but both of them had resigned from their positions in June. So they are asking for more time, but though they are asking for the more time, it is not looking like they are going to appoint a person of Indian origin, because if they wanted, they could have appointed by now. So that is the it is in concluding stages, but nonetheless Twitter has lost its intermediary status, and people are actually suing Twitter for various reasons, including UP government, because in a fake news case. So this is very much developing, but it is in near conclusion stages. This will either end Twitter or Twitter will comply with IT laws. So let us wait what it's in store for Twitter, because this government is not going to go away in 2 years. It has 2 years of time. Twitter cannot escape for 2 years. So this actually turning very interesting. But nonetheless, as I said earlier, government of India cannot ban Twitter, because we are in a democracy, and until they can take legal action or punitive action, but we cannot ban services just because they are not complying with laws. They have to be punished. If it is a matter of national security, like it is in the case of TikTok and other Chinese apps, then there is a cause foundation or base for banning such things. This is not in violation of national security, though one might pose it as such, but nonetheless this is simply a out of country for-profit organization simply willing not to choose with adhering to Indian laws. They're just simply arrogant, that's it. So moving on to the next article, crafting a unique partnership with Africa. So a few days back we discussed an editorial where we discussed that India should rethink and re-strategize and formulate a new policy for engaging with African countries. We discussed where our trade has been lopsided, in the sense that trade has declined. We also discussed the concept where Indian investment also was in decline. Now, whatever the majority of imports that we were getting from were not of that significant, and whatever the exports that we were doing were also of not that significance. So the conclusion of that editorial was that we need to formulate a new policy. In addition to that, I suggest you read that editorial once again and try to take some points from that and add into this editorial, because it gives you a solution to the problem that we studied a few days back. So whenever we discuss Africa in terms of engagement or in terms of policy or in terms of trade, the one constant that has been struggling in the discussion is the presence of the Chinese, because Chinese have made huge inroads into African economy. In the 55 countries in the African Union, it is evident that China has made pretty much exclusive contracts with almost all the countries. Either it may be an agreement, either it may be a financial thing, either it may be a loan, whatever. So let us understand what India needs to do to develop a relationship that is beneficial for both India and African Union countries, and that kind of offsets the Chinese advances that the Chinese have till now, or the Chinese inroads that they made till now. Now, India's engagement with African continent has been multi-faced, right? We had multiple projects. We have Indians right now farming in India. I think the last estimate put around 6 lakh hectares of agricultural land being cultivated by Indians, meaning companies. They went there, they made agreements. Commercial farming is what we call it. Now we have implemented projects with them. We have port calling agreements with certain countries. We have anti-piracy operations being conducted off the coast of Somalia and whatnot. And we also extended lines of credit. Even recently, our external affairs minister went and personally met the Kenyan leadership and exchanged that we are going to come up with new things to help Kenya and other African countries. But one thing that we have to concentrate, yes, we have capacity building initiative. We do cooperation in range of sectors, including military. We have peacekeeping forces there, Indian peacekeeping personnel in Africa. But what we have to concentrate is, yes, we have to concentrate on all other things, but our primary focus should be on agricultural sector. Indian congruence with African countries in agriculture sector is expanding, but it should be more than what it is right now. Again, re-strategizing and reformulating. Now, 20% of sub-Saharan African countries' GDP is from agricultural. 20% is a significant amount in terms of African economy. Now, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is expected to improve cost competitiveness by removing tariffs. So this agreement is nothing but all the 54 countries, or 55, but except one, I think I forgot the name, but they didn't sign the agreement. This agreement allows free trade of goods from one country to other country in Africa. So this means that virtually there are no borders in Africa, meaning like how European Union is. They don't have tariffs, they don't have borders. So it's not hard borders. Everybody can move freely from one thing to other. But if this agreement is pertinently related to only trade, goods can move from one country to other without tariffs and freely. Now, India should try to use that agreement to its advantage and try to invest heavily in agricultural sector. The cooperation should be huge. Now, we need to prioritize this, and we need to channel in resources so that we can shore up strength to the partnership that we have in agriculture. And this is one area which has been pretty much unexplored, and it has huge potential in terms of answering their own food security and our own food security also. Let us take the case of Kerala. Kerala had this problem with shortfall of cashews. They consume a lot of cashews. Now the Kerala government decided that they are going to partner with an African country, and they are going to explore a farm or a agricultural agreement where that particular African country is going to grow them cashews for Kerala, and Kerala would purchase it from them. That kind of agreement should be explored with other states also. It is undeniable that we have certain gaps in our food security chain. We could use Africa and help them and help us at the same time to address our own food security needs, all while engaging them with an agricultural economy. Now, this is where the Chinese have a lot of involvement in. Right, this is where the Chinese have realized the potential lies in, and they have been increasing their involvement in this sector. You see a lot of Chinese stakeholders in this particular sector. When you look at the numbers themselves, China is among Africa's largest trading partners. It is also Africa's single biggest creditor. They give loans to African countries. They give loans to African corporations. Now, Chinese corporations are dominating the region's infrastructure market. The construction, or the level of construction that Chinese companies are taking, is huge. And now they have started entering into agri-infrastructure sector. That is the congruence of both infrastructure and agricultural sector. And that is where the critical inflection point lies in. Now, this is in line with Chinese global aspirations. They want a presence on par to the Americans and the Europeans. They want to offset or hedge their bets against the Western powers. So the engagement, or the level of engagement that we are seeing of Chinese sectors or Chinese stakeholders in African agriculture is on a whole new strategic level and quantity and quality. India at this point of time cannot afford to dismiss China's engagement or Chinese engagement in African agriculture. Now, access to African natural resources, its untapped markets, and support for One China policy are primary drivers of Chinese engagement with region. There are other factors at play, but we are not going to go there. What is this One China policy? See, they come up with this kind of a very cunning way of getting compliance from other countries. What they do, they go to this country, they give them loans, they carry out large-scale infrastructure projects, they show that they are in the process of uplifting these countries or these regions out of poverty or whatever, and they say that if you need more, you have to agree that to that One China policy, meaning Taiwan doesn't exist, Hong Kong doesn't exist. These kind of tactics China have been employing for long, but getting out of it from the African countries is of significance, because Africa is a big regional player. Africa has a lot of say in international forum also. There is 55 countries voting for you in One China policy. That puts scales or tips scales in Chinese favor. So now China has also built industrial parks and economic zones in Africa which are attracting low-cost, labor-intensive manufacturing units out of China. Remember the Colombo port issue that we have been discussing in the past in Sri Lanka, where China wants to build a special economic zone in Colombo port area, and they want to build it on par with Singapore and other low taxed countries. That is what they are doing. That is what they have been doing in Africa. They found success in that. That is why they are trying to replicate in other Asian countries, particularly Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Pakistan, they couldn't do it because of the unbalances in the government itself and the regional unbalances. But Sri Lanka is stable enough that they can implement this project and actually get investment into that special zones. So this is not a new thing that China has been doing. They have a pretty good playbook. They try some things. If it is found successful, they scale it up to large scale. So these industrial parks and economic zones, they come at a cost of the local people, because whenever China builds an industrial park or an economic zone, the ownership of the park doesn't lie with the host country. It lies with the Chinese stakeholders, Chinese companies. And in order to get that infrastructure, China makes the host country to amend certain laws that are in favor of the Chinese stakeholders. But nonetheless, because they see employment, because they have no other option but to agree with it, certain countries turn to foreign land. So this is the way that they have been approaching. Particularly when you look at their investment patterns, they tend to not look at short-term profits. For them, the idea of having the brand China idea is important. That is where you stay for long periods of time. If you are in for short-term profits, you cannot build the brand identity that you want. Remember the Jio brand identity that we have the best example for. See, if Jio wanted to be as big as it is now, Jio had to give free data for a period of 6 months or 9 months or 1 year. If Jio wanted to, they could have charged the same price that were other companies being charged at that point of time, which was 300, 400 for 1 GB of data. But for them at that point of time, profits were not important. Jio was willing to suffer losses for a period of 3 or 4 years. For them, building the brand identity that Jio is something different from other companies was important. That is why when all telecom companies were charging 300, 400 for 1 GB of data, Jio came in and said, we are going to give you 3 GB of data free for 1 year. Look at where Jio is right now. I'm pretty sure within the next 2 or 3 years, India is going to become a 2-company telecom sector. Either it is going to be Airtel and Jio. That's it. It is already that, but we have Vodafone Idea, and Vodafone Idea, we screwed it up, not them. They had bad business practices and something else. But that is the importance of brand building. That is why China never invests in short-term profits. They are always there to build brand China. Now they are dominating the market in long term because they put in the work, they build the brand. There is identity of Chinese brands in African countries. Now they are pushing to include Chinese standards in host country. If you are an anthropology student or if you are an humanities student, you can clearly draw a parallel in how America forced dollar to be the global standard so that American standards are accepted worldwide. The same thing China is doing, but in reverse order. That's the parallel that you can draw from how the Chinese playbook is and the Western playbook is. Not only in agriculture, the Chinese companies are actually investing a lot into technology, tech firms also. Because they have started laying critical telecommunication infrastructure in various countries. They are bringing in huge capital funds that are investing in African tech firms. And they are also expanding into small regional enterprises across the countries. It's not that they are attacking only the agricultural sector. Their entire plan seems to be 360 degrees, multi-phased. That is what Chinese are doing. What we were supposed to do or what we are supposed to do, they are doing it. This is not a criticism against India. It is just what they are doing. We are also engaging with them in a multi-phased way. But we are not aggressive as they are. Because we have our own challenges. In order to augment the African agricultural sector, they had set up 20 agricultural technology demonstration centers where Chinese agronomists come there, work with the locals, they develop new crop varieties to fit the local weather patterns and soil patterns, thus increasing crop yields. Now, these agricultural technology demonstration centers do not only operate independently, they go and get tied up with local universities, they conduct workshops, they give classes for officials, government officials, they train government officials, and not only that, they give equipment to small farm holders on lease basis. If they cannot afford it, they'll give at very, very, very low prices. This is where things get a little bit darker, in the sense that the entire African-China relationship is complex. It is growing, but it is very complex because the diaspora of the Chinese people that are migrating into Africa are very insulated. They don't tend to mingle with the local population. The cultural differences is so far and wide that there is a growing resentment in the local population, because wherever the Chinese tend to go, they tend to actually disrupt the social fabric of that region. They tend to cocoon up, they tend to build borders kind of a thing. It's actually crazy when you go to some African country where there is a large presence of Chinese diaspora and you look at how different they are, meaning that they don't mingle with the local population. So that kind of causes a concern from the surrounding local populace also. And not only that, not only a cultural aspect, their entire trade is tilted towards the Chinese, and their entire African countries are in debt, actual debt to Chinese government and Chinese stakeholders. And because they are trying to build brand China there, the prices that they offer in comparison to local manufacturers is vast. Let us say a local manufacturer's product costs 10 rupees. The Chinese are willing to sell it for 3 rupees or 2 rupees, because remember, they are not in for the profits, they are in for building the brand of China. So this is where a lot of problems come to the surface. The debt, the lopsided trade, the competition with local businesses, and the negative perception accompanied by greater political and socio-economic interlinkings. That we'll discuss somewhere later, but for you right now, let us understand that the trade discrepancy between China, the trade deficit in African countries with China is in favor of Chinese. Now, Chinese and African experts working with the ATDCs operate in silos. So to give you an example, the author of this article found that whatever the technology that China is implying in the mainland China, they are not sharing that technologies with the African counterparts, meaning African population or African countries. They are sharing the basic things, but they are not actually sharing all the knowledge. So that is where the operating in silos. There is a difference between what the Chinese are actually capable of and what they are teaching to the African counterparts. Like how Russia has this absolute advantage in terms of building military goods, but what they sell to other countries is not what they use. So understand this. We know that Russia has this superiority in building military equipment, but the problem comes with the equipment that Russian military use is far different and far superior than what it sells to other countries. The exception may be India in 1 or 2 cases, because the level of trust that the Russians have in India. But if you look at to other countries and see the equipment, the same equipment that is being sold to the other country and the same equipment being used in Russia, are not the same. The level of sophistication, the advancement this Russian weapons have, they tend not to translate into the weapons that are being sold to other countries. So that is what these people are doing here, the Chinese are doing here. Now, how India should engage with that? To conclude this entire editorial, India actually has to conduct a thorough impact assessment to understand the existing capacity building initiative in the agricultural field, where we stand. But currently we are in a good place. The only way India can make a difference in this paradigm or in this particular sector is to not sideline the African part of the equation. See, there are a lot of African people that I follow who are very critical of Chinese actions and antics in African countries, because they feel that, like any other Western country, China is also doing the same. They are not listening to the needs of the African voices. What India can do and what India has been doing was, whenever we tried to come up with a policy in Africa, we always respected the priorities of the African countries, our partners. China is not doing that. So that is where the inherent difference lies between our approach and their approach. We have to use that for our advantage. The trust that African countries have in us, because we always prioritize their needs and try to incorporate our policy or frame our policies surrounding their priorities, will certainly give us an upper hand over the Beijing policy. Now we have to, at this point, try to bring in a new perspective to our engagement with African countries. That is why we need to craft a unique modern partnership with Africa that takes in concerns of both Indian needs and African needs, and it should be a collective endeavor. Moving on to the next article, cities along rivers are to include conservation plans. Now, the National Mission for Clean Ganga had released a policy document which is supposed to guide cities that are lying along the banks of river Ganga. Now, the policy document states that cities which are constructed on the banks of river Ganga should have or will have to incorporate river conservation plans when they prepare their master plans. Moving on to the next article, survey of class 3 students to set baseline for literacy goal. Yesterday we studied about Nipun Bharat mission. We studied about Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan or Samagra Shiksha mission. Yesterday we talked about how the literacy and the numeracy of grade 3 is calculated, or why class 3 has been set as the baseline. But we never went into the details as to why class 3 students were chosen as the baseline for this mission. And yesterday we discussed about how the plan was supposed to be implemented in 2024 and 2025, I think, but nonetheless we pushed it by 1 year or 2 years because of COVID-19. Now, the goal or the central pillar of the Nipun Bharat mission, which has set its goal to 26 and 27, is that every class 3 child should be able to read with understanding at a rate of at least 60 words per minute, and should be able to read and write numbers up to 9,999 and solve simple multiplication problems. This is the baseline. Now they are actually conducting a national achievement survey of class 3 students across India that will set a baseline to track future progress from henceforth. So what is the expectation right now? The expectation currently is that until grade 3 or class 3, children are expected to learn to read and acquire basic skills. After grade 3, children are expected to be able to read, to learn, and if that does not happen, that learning gap has been widening. So until 3 it should be learn to read. From 3rd class onwards it should be read to learn. So you learn how to read, then you use that capacity to learn new things. That is the shift. But what Nipun Bharat, or the reason why we are coming with Nipun Bharat is, when they did a base study as to is that really happening, is the learn to read to learn transition happening after class 3, the answer seems to be that no. That is why they chose grade 3. Now if that gap is not fulfilled, the learning difficulties that the kids are going to face in future is going to be much harder. So if that does not happen at grade 3, the gap grows. The kids cannot understand the language in textbook. They cannot do mathematics, which is far more important than any other subject. And as the grades go up, the complexity of the subjects go up and they fall back, and at the end of the day, they chose not to continue education, dropouts, which is detrimental to our future. That is why they found that grade 3 is the inflection point, and this is where children have not made it and get left behind. So that is why they chose grade 3, because the transition of learning to read to reading to learn happens at grade 3 in our education system, and people are not being measured whether they can actually learn to read, then transition to reading to learn. That is why grade 3 has been chosen as the inflection point in Nipun Bharat mission. Moving on to the next article, over 1,000 Afghan troops flee to Tajikistan. So we discussed yesterday how 300 or 400 troops fled to Tajikistan. It seems that the number is far higher. The reason seems to be that they were cut off from supply chains, meaning Taliban was able to successfully isolate thousands of Afghan troops from connecting with their core battalions. With a shortage of weapons, with shortage of supplies, with shortage of food, they had no other option but to flee, abandoning their positions into Tajikistan to save their lives. Now, the Bagram Air Force is gone. The NATO troops are pulling out. A small contingent of US and NATO troops will be present to assist training of Afghan national forces. And it seems that day by day, the number of troops that are leaving or abandoning their positions in the northeastern part of the country or northern countryside, where Taliban has the upper hand, seems to be rising day by day. Now, there are counter attacks that are being engaged or employed by the Afghan security forces, but the extent or the damage has already been done. That's the issue right now. As I said, the Afghan army is good, but they have their own challenges. The Afghan commandos, or the special forces as they call, they are the best, but they are in limited numbers. Now it is an emergency situation in Afghan government. They have to step up their counteroffensives as soon as possible. Otherwise, it's not too short from now, where furthermore critical cities and critical capitals, regional capital, provincial capitals that are going to fall into the hands of Taliban forces. Moving on to the next article, after cyber attack, hackers demand 70 million. So recently there was a cyber attack on US firm, and it seems that experts are saying that over 1,000 companies were affected from this attack, and data was even stolen from a US firm called 𝐎𝐫𝐠. Now the hackers who launched this attack are saying that we will give you a universal decryption key, but in order to do that you have to pay 70 million ransom in Bitcoin. And also they are saying that pay us 70 million so that we'll give you back the data that we stole, or otherwise we are going to sell it in black market. So they released a blog post saying that we will give a decryption tool online, a universal decryption tool that can be used by everyone who are attacked, whose computers or systems were attacked, and this decryption tool will decrypt all the encrypted data in 1 hour. But in order to do that, you have to pay us $70 million in Bitcoin. Now experts are saying that the attack was probably carried out by an attack group called REVIL, REVIL. This is a Russian speaking hacking group that is known for carrying out such attacks in the past, but nonetheless we don't know whether this is from a Russian backed entity or not, but this group has been known to attack global corporations, and they demanded similar amounts of ransom in the past. But it looks like in the recent attack some 1,000 companies were affected by it, and they are demanding 70 million in ransomware, and the group that did this thing is called REVIL. So moving on to the next article, China wants to expand ties with Europe, she tells Macron, Merkel. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday told French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel he hoped that China and Europe would expand cooperation to better expand their relationship in a bid to respond to global challenges. And in a three-way video call that he had with both of his counterparts in France and Germany, he expected that Europeans can play an active role in international affairs and they can actually achieve strategic independence. What he is implying is that European countries are still operating under the shadows of America in terms of international affairs and strategic affairs. He is indirectly saying that shed American ideologies, come join with us. That is what he means. They can achieve strategic independence. It means that you don't have strategic independence now. Whatever you are doing or you are carrying out American policy, leave that, come and join us.
Borthakur IAS Academy. প্রস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। Borthakur IAS Academy.